Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey, now live all over social media here for our our finals week one preview, I should say. Winnie, it's been 27 long, hard weeks in the NRL. There's been some stinking weeks, there's been some awesome weeks. It's been a journey, but we arrive at the tail end of the season, mate, and the most important part, that is finals. How excited are you and how are you doing?
Mate, I'm absolutely pumped. I have to start our finals preview with a big apology. We're 15 minutes late off the mark. I had some things pop up, and I want to assure everyone I had all the time to do my full handicap, and I have all my notes, but it's all the little things that come along with producing this show going live. And there's like certain codes you need, there's certain digital assets, uploads, downloads, and it's actually so stressful when you know you're running late and it's like every minute is another minute people are waiting, and I'm just thinking, I've got to connect that light, get this mic working, and you don't want to make a mistake. But I have had the time to find some best bets I like, to really deep dive for very intriguing matchups. And you know what, this is only part 1 or 2 as well. We're going to give you everything for the 4 games, but there's going to be a finals preview extravaganza with a special guest or 2 on Thursday night to do a more of an overall view of the finals, and with some custom markets and some deep dives into futures markets as well. So we're delivering the goods this week, that's for sure. I've had a really stressful season, honestly, in terms of how the best bets results have played out. But I'm hoping to rediscover the form of last year's finals where we did go perfect 6-0.
100%, mate. That is the goal. G'day, Ryan, Josh, Colt on YouTube. Plenty of comments rolling through on Instagram. One particularly made me laugh, Winnie. I probably won't read it out on the show, but I'll reveal it to you after. And I did actually make a note, mate, saying, I was going to ask you if you have any futures bets. So we will use that to plug the show that you'll have later in the week, mate. But we do have best bets here today, mate. You go first with yours. I'll go with Clarkey's collect right after you, mate. What have you got for us in the way of best bets for finals week one?
Okay, so I'm going to have 2 best bets on the opening game of the finals. So Roosters, Panthers, I want to play either team 1 to 12, and that's $1.85 on 365. And then in a similar vein, I also really like Roosters plus 1.5 tries in the try handicap, which is $1.82 on Toppy. Now, those bets are intertwined. You can take one or the other. Clearly, if Penrith wins 13 plus, they're both going to get blown away. But I am going to make the case for why I really think this matchup is very even. I think the Roosters are going to throw the kitchen sink at Penrith. I understand Penrith's got to be favourite. The biggest edges to Penrith's going to be home field and the halves. I'm just not sure if that is certainly going to mean that that the Panthers win by 2 or more tries. So I think the Roosters are going to give us an absolute cracker, rip-snorting game to start the finals. And then we're going to go all the way to Sunday for my 3rd best bet of the round. And I'll tell you who I think wins the game when we do the preview, but I'm going to have a first half play on the Canterbury Bulldogs plus half a point at $1.88. So that's first half handicap on Ladbrokes and Neds. Because I think it could be a cautious start. It's going to be a defensive grind, especially early. Not a lot of points in finals matches, so that half point can be also valuable. And I also think the Dogs, who were totally outmatched by Manly only 2 weeks ago, have several reasons why they can rebound in this one.
I like it, mate. For Clarkey's collect, I've actually gone somewhat conservative, which I usually do. But if you guys remember, I think we're up to plus 15.8. So getting real close to 16 units there. And I think we've lost the last 3 in a row, I believe. So it's been
you might be mixing up the same game record. 12.8 is the Clarkey collect unit.
I think it was as high as 15.8.
Oh, it got as high as. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
And I just haven't gone good. So I'm going to go 2 reliable teams that rarely ever let anyone down. I'm simply going to take Storm to win at home and Panthers to win at home as well. Head to head, you multi those 2 up. I found the best was $1.87 on Sportsbet, but on most bookies you could get it $1.80 plus, which does qualify for a best bet on the show as well. I'll get into all my reasons why, but the simple reason is it's simple. They're the top 2 teams for a reason, and they know what they're playing for in terms of getting the week off in week 2 of the finals. Alrighty,
I was
just
going to
one.
say, mate, don't spoil Clarkey's collect, but you've laid it out there. No one's going to be surprised in picking Penrith or Melbourne. But the fact that the two of them head to head, you multi it together and you get like essentially an average best bet price. I'd love to hear what people think about that. I'm sure a lot of people in their mind, that sounds as safe as any bet you could find this weekend. I think there'll be a lot of love for that play, and it's as simple as can be. Anybody you ask would pick that, but you won't find a lot of people who are stoutly going to tell you that that bet won't win either. So sometimes if you're going to be very surprised if a bet doesn't win, it could be a strong play.
And I'm very interested to all of our live listeners there. Does anyone disagree fundamentally with my multi there? Do they think there's too much risk around that $1.87 mark? Let me know. I can see Neil from Facebook says he missed the best bets, Winnie. So why don't we roll a clip from the CEO of TopSport, Mr. Tristan Merlehan, and you can drop him in the comments.
Yes, I will put Tristan's clip here now. I'll put my best bets up, and I'll invite you guys to comment on mine as well as Clarkey's.
G'day everyone, it's Tristan Merlehan here from TopSport. Just down in Melbourne, there's the annual wagering conference down here for the next couple of days. So plenty happening in the world of wagering, but we've got a very important week coming up in rugby league as well, where the finals are here. And it looks like all the expected big guns that were expected to be named have been named, which is brilliant to see. The marketplace had already basically factored all of them in as playing, I suggest, because none of the markets have moved at all since we opened them on the weekend, which is good. It means there's going to be good, solid betting. Obviously, there's been a bit of a drama out Bulldogs' way, which has seen that market shift, but that's obviously not related to the team lists that were announced. So, should be some cracking games of football. There looks like some really, strong teams. Obviously, unfortunately for the Roosters, they're missing a few players, but I think out of everyone that's was possible to play, they've all been named. So that's good to see. Excited to see some high-quality games over the next few weeks. On the weekend just gone, as I've always touched on, it's always a dangerous week to get through that. There was a lot of support, as you would expect, for Manly in their game when the Sharks couldn't move from fourth. So that one was a pretty handy result when obviously the Sharks came out and were dominant there on Sunday. The rest of the weekend was a bit up and down. The Cowboys were absolutely smashed in their game against the Bulldogs, so the punters got the chocolates there. The Eels were well backed in the Spoon Bowl. The Raiders got a result against the Dragons plus the start. For us, though, our biggest positive result was actually the Knights against the Dolphins. There was an avalanche of money with us for the Dolphins late, and Newcastle, they got the job done, even though there were a few controversial calls, but it was a really high-quality game. So we end up just getting our nose in front on the back of it, but looking forward to moving into the big games now over the next month, and there's going to be plenty of action, no doubt. So good luck if you're having a wager, and of course, gamble responsibly.
I love how Tristan usually says, good luck if you're having a punt, but he's at the wagering conference. So he said, good luck if you're having a wager. Clearly a word that's getting thrown around a fair bit there, mate. Thank you very much to Tristan for that clip. As always, we always appreciate his exclusive market insights. And let's get to it, mate. 4 games to break down for you all here live. It starts on Friday, 7:50 p.m. at Bluebet Stadium when the Panthers host the Sydney Roosters. Now, this line was set at -7.5 against the Panthers. It has not moved since team lists. I think we got pretty much what we expected. Nathan Cleary returns. Dom Young and Daniel Tupou come back in. And Lindsay Collins and Nat Butcher both return for the Roosters as well. All right, Winnie, it's second versus third. All eyes are on Nathan Cleary's return for the Panthers against the Roosters side that will be missing their usual hooker and halfback. But you think that the Roosters have enough to make this a close one with the Panthers in Penrith?
Yeah, I do. I think we get a beauty to kick off the finals at the foot of the mountains. Penrith's been the benchmark in rugby league for the last 3 years. And in fact, you go 4 years ago, you look at that was when Penrith made their first grand final run, and the shoe was completely on the other foot. The Roosters were the back-to-back premiers going into the 2020 season, and it was the upstart Panthers that had the great regular season and met the Roosters in week 1 of the finals, as they do here. And that was actually a bit of a changing of the tide because Penrith won that game by the narrowest margin. I think Penrith weathered an early storm, then got out to a decent lead. Roosters gave them a scare, but Penrith won, memory serves, by 1 point and went on to get to the grand final, while the Roosters, I think, bowed out in straight sets. And that has set the tone for the last 4 years because the Roosters have had a very tough time against Penrith ever since, and the Melbourne Storm as well, for that matter. So coming into the finals, the biggest question about the Chooks was always going to be whether they could defy those struggles and upset the elites of the competition. And personally, I had this concept in my mind that I really wasn't worried about the inept record. You know how good Penrith has been, and Storm as well in the regular season the last few years. Each game has its own story. Yes, the Roosters were a bit under par in a couple of games, and other seasons the Roosters played Penrith and there was just a juggernaut of a side that very few teams beat. So the inept record that the Roosters have against Penrith was not a concern to me. I'm sure Clarkey will give you guys the precise numbers. Not only did I think that the Roosters could beat anyone going into these finals, I was ready to pick the Roosters. But there's no point back in the Roosters 2 or 3 weeks ago when they were $4 to win the comp. Like it was seen as a very realistic possibility. But something bad could happen before finals, and the odds usually aren't going to change a lot, in a couple of weeks when a team's already come in. So I think I was prepared to play the Roosters in any big game against anybody. Then round 26 happens. So firstly, the Roosters' dream of avoiding Penrith and the Storm getting to a prelim without having to face either is vanquished when the Sharks lose to the Warriors on the Siren. But the following day it gets a lot worse. Penrith wins, gets up to the 2-3. Okay, well, Penrith will still have to travel to Allianz as opposed to play at Penrith Park. That's unless the Roosters lose to the Raiders. But they do lose to the Raiders, and worst of all, Roosters lose, I would say, their best player of the season, though you're going to tell me, of course, how awesome Teddy's been. But I'm talking about the halfback, Sam Walker, Brandon Smith, followed by Radley. And now that's all that matters really is how it stands tonight. How drastically does that all change the equation, changing home field and losing those 3 star players? We look at Penrith. They've had their setbacks as well this year. Penrith's had major injuries. Penrith, as they always do, have numerous rep selections, which is always a tough period to navigate. We say that the Origin period crippled Brisbane. Penrith had as many, if not more, important players involved. It's not easy. Edwards got a maiden selection and played his heart out. You get the serious injuries to Cleary, not just the recent shoulder, but the hamstring before that. And yet, here we are in week 28, and Penrith's virtually full strength. I'm trying to think is there anyone out for Penrith at all? You'd say, Taylor May was having a good year, and then he had his off-field dramas, but Alamotti's filled that amicably. So I look at Penrith, and if you had backed Penrith pre-season or you backed them any way through the year, you've got to be feeling great about where Penrith stand and having a full strength side and being at home. Your biggest concern about Penrith, other than just how well Melbourne have emerged, and we'll get to that, is the risk of a re-injury to Cleary because he's had this shoulder and hamstring issues. And I heard some people speculate that the Panthers should back themselves to win this game without Nathan and then give him 2 more complete weeks to heal. But it depends on the type of injury it is. If there's less of a re-injury risk and it's more of a pain tolerance, then of course Nathan's so tough. He's going to play through it. You want the best player in the game at the helm to join, as I say, a stacked roster. And then you win that, then you can put the shoulder on ice for another couple of weeks. Because we've got only 4 games, I actually want to give you my breakdown in 2 parts. So that was part 1, if you like. Save me talking for too long in a row. Let me throw back to you. I want to start by asking you, are you concerned about Penrith's recent form? I could go back to the last 2 months because Penrith had a bye in round 19. So in the last 8 games, Penrith lost twice. And of the 6 wins, 3 of them were single-digit wins, pretty close. And also looking at the last 8 from Penrith, only covered the spread twice. So 6 losses against the spread. Does that kind of middling form, especially by Penrith's lofty standards, concern you?
Not particularly, because I went back and looked at their form from round 21 onwards in the 3 years that they won their titles. In 2021, they actually came into the last 5 rounds. They won 3 and lost 2. So they have came in with mediocre form before and really nailed their form once it came finals time. I just think the last few weeks I've been really predicting this Panthers side to put their foot down and make a statement. And to be frank, you're absolutely right. Their form, by their standards at least, has been lackluster because we do hold them to a much higher account than most teams. But realistically, I can think of no better time for them to flex their premiership muscle and send that statement to the rest of the competition, knowing that they get the week off. Of course, there is some question marks around Nathan Cleary's return, but I don't think we should expect any teething problems. It's not like he's a new signing. He's been with the core of this side for 4 seasons now. So I think he slots straight in. And I also think that by him stepping his role back a little bit, they still have enough dangerous players in that side, such as Yeo, Luai, and Edwards, that can pick up the slack a little bit and really help him settle those nerves in his return. So I'm completely fine with that as well. When I went back and had a look at the Roosters season, now, of the current final sides, they've only won 3 games. Those wins came over the Knights, Bulldogs, and Manly, who I believe is 6, 7, and 8 in this final series. Now, in those games, Winnie, they conceded 20 points on average and scored 27 points on average, which is interesting as how this line's fallen in that 7.5 mark. That is the record that they're kind of around, that 7-point mark when it comes to other top 8 sides.
Do you mean the other way around?
Oh, it would be other way.
27-20.
It would be other way. My apologies there.
Yeah.
But before the Panthers, like, they're a top 4 side. So they are a level above with respect to the Knights, Bulldogs, and Manly. I know we're all in the finals now, but Penrith are a level above. So I would expect those averages to drop. Now, in those games where they won the 3 against top 8 sides, Sam Walker and Brandon Smith played in 2 of those games. And against the Knights, who finished 8th, Sam Walker and James Tedesco were missing. So again, in 2 or 3 of those games, they were full strength. They only managed to win by a margin of 7. So I think against the Panthers, you have to detract from that a little bit again. And when I go over the fence to the Panthers, you can see they've beaten the Roosters for the last 9 games in a row. They are aiming to become the first ever team in NRL history to win 10 straight finals games. So by those numbers, they have the Roosters number themselves, but they're also prepared to meet these big games and really put down a great performance, I feel. They have recorded 6 wins over top 8 sides this year, so that's double the Roosters. I think when I throw that all together, mate, I am confident the Roosters will win here and cover that line. I just think it's time they made a statement, and they haven't done it in a long time, really going back to round 21, mate. So that's my prediction. Tie it all together for us, mate, and let us know how you see this one playing out.
10 straight finals games, but I suppose to win a comp, you've got to win at least 3 finals in a row, and we all know they've won 3 comps in a row. It's a crazy record, though, and how many more finals games is Penrith going to stack? You've got to make them favourites here. I'm sorry if I think I might have mucked up what you said because I misunderstood it first, but you talked about when the Roosters beat finals teams, they were outscoring them 27-20 on average. And then against the rest of the top 5, which of course Roosters are one of, but against the next 4 best teams in the comp, the Roosters didn't register a single win. So we're talking obviously Penrith, Melbourne, Cronulla, and North Queensland.
Yes.
So it's a major question mark, and it's a very fair question mark. Going back to, I have to say I expect Penrith wins this as well, despite taking the Roosters with the try handicap, and then either 1-12 is always a bet you play when you give the underdog a chance. But the personnel, you talk about the experience, and that's also why I don't have major concerns over, let's say, rust of Nathan, who's been out 5 or 6 weeks, home field, and on Nathan Cleary again, just that Iceman factor. Like his ability to kick goals, you're shocked if he ever misses one. You know he's going to come up with a big play if they need it. And I just lost a best bet where I watched Swali kick 33% in the first half against Souths and lost the best bet by 1.5 points, So that alone could decide this match. So if we both agree Penrith wins, the question is who covers the line? When I look at the matchup, I've got the Roosters with the better back 5 for me, but it is pretty damn close. But that's how star-studded I rate the Roosters outside backs. Then the Panthers have an even bigger edge in the halves, clearly the superior halves. Like, let's not discount what Luai can do. And as opposed to, yes, Manu may roam infield, but it's essentially Luke Keary controlling the show and then backed up by Sand and Smith. Then I look at the forwards. I'm going to call the forward battle dead even. You might think naturally that Penrith starts with Fish and Leota. How can any prop rotation match that? But if you're answering with Collins, the former Panther Lenu, and Terrell May and the seasons he has had off the bench, I think that is even. And speaking of benches, I also couldn't really split them, nor could I with the coaches, who are both not just elite, but historically elite, I believe. So if the only real difference between the sides, yes, Penrith's at home, but I'd say that's cancelled out by how much better the Roosters' outside backs are. It's kind of like, is the advantage in the halves at 6 and 7, Cleary and Luai, is that worth over a converted try? And what I'm landing on is I think it's worth about a try. And if you want to call it a converted try, sure. But I would still lean to the +7.5. But then when I started thinking about taking Roosters +7.5, I thought, well, if Penrith wins by 8, it's much more likely that there's one try between the sides, and maybe it's a 24-16 type game. Maybe it's an 18-10, but just one try between them, but a missed conversion. Or maybe it's one try between them and Penrith adds a 2. I thought Penrith was a little bit casual last week against your Titans, leading by 4, and they didn't want to take the 2 a couple of times. And eventually, late in the game, the Panthers thought, oh, we better take the 2 and make sure we win this one and get this home advantage. So I do think that there's one try or less between these sides. That's why I'll go a Panthers narrow win on the back of Cleary's precise kicking. But I don't have to worry about Cleary's kicking with my +1.5 tries handicap. And either 1 to 12, I think, is a great way to play the Roosters too, because a Roosters 13+ win on this ground feels so unlikely. So you are kind of getting those 5 extra points if you're willing to take on that risk. And as I said at the top, if Penrith wins big, you're going to lose both. So stake accordingly, understanding that the 2 legs are, fairly correlated. We could go 1-1, but there's a greater chance of like 2-0 or 0-2. But ultimately, I think this is the mother of all kitchen sink games for the Roosters, because the Roosters are no chance of winning the comp if they are to lose on Friday night. But if the Roosters can get the week off, get in a home prelim, which and potentially wouldn't be against Melbourne or Penrith, the Roosters have a chance. So I think it sets up an almighty showdown to kick off the finals.
Absolutely, mate. We are getting treated with the start, and the second game is just as good. It's Saturday, 4 p.m. We're at Amy Park in Melbourne. The Storm host the Sharkies. The line is set at -9.5 against the Storm. There's been no movement there. Ryan Pappenhausen returns for them at fullback. Christian Welch returns on the interchange. For the Sharks, Tom Hazelton is named on the extended bench. He is in some doubt with a knee injury, and Oregon Kaufusi returns in their front row. When we talk about the Storm at home, Winnie, they are a formidable opponent. But you don't need to tell that to Sharkies fans, or you don't need to remind them, rather. They did get the job done earlier this year against the Storm in Melbourne. So when you break this one down, do you think it's going to be repeat for the Sharkies or revenge for the Storm?
Once again, it'd be very hard to actually say that Cronulla's going to win or that Cronulla should be favourite. I think that's an impossible argument to make. However, it's funny that how the Storm really started this year pretty unconvincingly. I looked at the first 11 games for the Storm, which is the first 13 rounds, but they had a couple of buys, including a round 12. It was a round 12 bye. No, it might have been a round 13 bye after playing 11 games, right? And I think Melbourne came out of that bye top of the ladder. But at the time, the Storm were far from convincing. So I'm talking about an 8-3 record, right, which included a loss to the Knights, a loss to the Sharks, and a loss to Manly. Now, fair enough, all those sides ended up making the finals. But let me run you through some of the Storm's first 8 wins. They beat Penrith in week 1, caught the Panthers at a great time. Luai wasn't there, and Penrith started the season slow. Got out of jail against the Warriors that were dead to rights. The Storm should have lost that game. The Storm beat Brisbane by only 2 points, and that was a Brisbane team with no Walsh. Reynolds got injured first half, and the game was in Melbourne. The Storm beat the Dogs by 2 points and needed a late try. The Storm beat your Titans by only 2 points and got made nervous. And at the time, we were saying, well, the class is prevailing, and it's something to be said about a team that can win all these tight games. But as I said, great teams don't win close games. Great teams avoid close games. Since round 17, now let me run you through the back end of the year. The Storm have 7 double-digit wins, and the only games in the last 3 months that the Storm have not won by double digits was a home upset by the Dragons, which fair enough was a bit of a surprise. A win in Penrith. So, yeah, it wasn't a double-digit win, but still impressive to beat Penrith by any margin. And that North Queensland game where that Storm played the B team and still covered the line. So, basically, Melbourne come into the finals, I would say rightfully favourites outright and the hottest team in the competition. And this side's had their share of injury concerns as well. It was Pappenhausen early off the knee, Munster, the groin, Grant, the sternum, but they're all back on deck and they're playing at a venue where the Storm are so formidable. We look at Cronulla, that's a team that's been harder to plot like a consistent trend line. I can say Melbourne were coasting along, probably getting the rub of the green, winning the tight ones, and not as good as their record. But then at the end of the year, Melbourne came home like a freight train and had the luxury of picking and choosing their spots. Cronulla's been much more up and down, but you have to give the Sharks credit and say they've held a top 4 spot essentially all year and did lose their halfback for a significant portion. That man being Nicho Hynes, who's been back a couple of weeks now, which is positive that he was able to return from the injury, but they've had mixed returns, the Sharks, with Nicho back as well. And then Fitzgibbon opted out of resting anybody on Sunday, despite the fact the Sharks couldn't improve their position or drop. And that spoiled my best bet. But I don't think that choice is going to hurt Cronulla's hopes on Saturday. I think getting that hit out, avoiding a slump into the finals, I can understand that. And if the Sharkies could pull this upset and get rest in round 2 of the finals, then you're not going to worry at all that you played full strength in round 27. Let me throw it back your way before I give you my full feel of how this one plays out. This Sharks team is one of the few sides that has already won a game at Amy Park this year. How much do you read into that result in round 10?
Well, I'll start right there because I think as brave as the Sharks were and as much credit as we need to give them for that win, I believe to beat the Storm in Melbourne under any circumstances, part of it is the Storm has to be off their game. It's not often the Storm beat themselves, and I'm not saying they did it on this occasion, but they didn't play to their potential, and that's what allowed the Sharkies to turn up and get that win there. I also think another note that no one really talks about when we break down that Sharks win is, yes, the Sharks were missing Nicho Hynes and Braden Trindle, 2 members of their spine. The Storm were also missing Jerome Hughes and Ryan Pappenhausen. I think because they've covered their injuries so well this year with Farlongo and Wishart in that example there, we overlook it. But they were still missing half their spine, just like the Sharks were. One thing I always feel for the Storm, they are a very difficult side, it seems, to beat twice in a row. They typically learn their lessons in a really big way under Craig Bellamy. They come back with a tweaked game plan, reapply themselves with more diligence for the next encounter. And given that they have pretty much treated the week before as their resting week, they've come in and had their rehearsal where they pumped the Broncos. I think that they're still ready to go. I think they've hit form at the right time. They are peaking. I think that they can get the Sharkies here, and then that will give them the rest that they're hoping for next week. At home in the finals recently, Storm have won 6 of their last 8, so they've only dropped 2, and it's a venue that we know they perform very well at in the regular season. That, of course, carries across to the finals. But over to the Sharks, when we talk finals, they have not won a finals game since 2018, and they have lost their last 6 finals games in a row. So there is pressure on this club, and I think the man that holds most of that pressure is Nicho Hynes. And my read here isn't 100% certain, but I will say this. People will write Nicho Hynes off based on Origin 1 this year, but I think even if Mitchell Moses was there, the Blues were still not winning just by the nature of that early send-off in an Origin game. So all this pressure is really building on Nicho Hynes because he came up short in that game and in finals games in the past here with the Sharks. And that pressure could culminate in him putting in a huge stint against his former club. I don't want to write that off. But if I have to make the prediction now, I will say that doesn't happen based on their track record, but also the fact that Craig Bellamy is a huge part of his game. And I do feel he's carried across most of his attributes from fullback to a halfback. Even when he won the Dally M in 2022, I don't think people said, wow, this is a new Nicho Hynes. He's playing completely different to what we saw at the Storm. He just kind of added a few more attributes or more strings to his bow. So I do think the Storm will have the right game plan to shut him down. And I wanted to bring up the example of Nathan Cleary in the 2020 grand final. He was unstoppable at that stage. He was the favorite for the Dally M. He was the best player in the competition. The Panthers had only lost one game all year, I think it was, and the Storm shut him down in the grand final. They made him throw intercept passes. His kicking game wasn't effective, and they really pressured him. I think they can replicate that on Nicho Hynes, even more so because he's previously been at the club, and Craig Bellamy has helped build his game to the standard at where it is now. Winnie, both sides this year have 6 wins over top 8 opposition. I think the Storm are slightly more impressive because they've done it with slightly more injuries, but that's even there. Everything else, in my view, points to the Storm's favour, and so I have to predict that they will win this game. I'm not sure about that line, though. A double digit against the Sharkies, I still respect them enough to just say Storm head-to-head, mate. Tie it all together for us and put your bow on this game, please.
Yeah, what you mentioned there about shutting down the opponent's biggest threat, the one that comes to mind for me was, it must have still been COVID. Was it 2021? Or am I thinking 2020 as well, where Turbo had set the league on fire, and it was a top 4 clash. I know I went to it. It was at the Sunny Coast Stadium, and the Storm completely shut down Trbojevic. And Bellamy is a defensive-minded coach that leaves no stone unturned. The Sharkies are that type of team that they're not so focused on one player necessarily, because I don't think the Sharks have that same star power that the other elite contenders do. So it is generally more of a group effort. And I think since maybe Hynes was that guy the year he won the Dally M, but integrating him back into the team after his injury, I'm sure it's going to suit Cronulla better to not put as much on Hynes. He may wear the 7 in this game, in fact, but realistically may play just as much of a 5/8 role and leave a lot more of an in-game kicking and controlling to Braden Trindle. You also made another comment where I know I've spread misinformation in past weeks, and you've just picked up on that, because I'm sure I made the comment that Cronulla hasn't won a finals game since the 2016 grand final, which I was at as well, and that was a crazy game. But you said 2018, and I was thinking, what was 2018? And I do remember the Sharkies were bloody good in 2018, lost a really tight one in the first week of the finals to the Roosters, a game where I think Cooper Cronk scores a try where the ball hits the post. Wade Graham tears his ACL in the same play. Anyway, Roosters go on and win the comp. But I do remember second week of the finals was that wild one where the Sharks played the Panthers. And I want to say Cronulla was up like 20-0, and then Panthers got it back to 20-all, but then maybe Val Holmes kicked a field goal. So that basically the Sharks have one win in finals games since they won the comp, and it was by 1 point, right? But thanks for clarifying that. To me, look, you've picked Penrith and Melbourne, and I'm not going to call either of them a lock. I think both could be upset, but I'd feel better about the Roosters' chances than the Sharks. And the line, is a couple of points higher. And to me, the Storm excellence in the spine is the biggest differentiator. You just feel like all the Melbourne pack and outside backs as well have to do is play as good as their opposite number. And it's just hard to see Melbourne get trumped. You look at the Sharks, they can be really gritty, which I think is the style of play that could trouble Melbourne and make this a great contest. The Sharks did already win down here, and even the Dragons play that sort of similar style where they want to muck the game up a bit and drag you down to their level. I just wonder, in a must-win, in a finals game, do Cronulla really have that belief that they can win? Because as you say, it was a different story to go down and win in the regular season. Yeah, no, Nico, but as you say, the Storm had some star halves out as well. Now the Storm's full strength. Does Cronulla really believe they can win? And what I mean by that is, if Cronulla's down a try or something in the second half and the game is in the balance and the cover is in the balance, does Cronulla have the belief, like who are they looking at to turn the game, to turn it into their favour? The answer should be Nico, but he's had a patchy year. You just can't expect that. When Cronulla starts leaning on Nico too heavily is when he can actually make mistakes and the game can go sideways for the Sharks. On the other side of things, Melbourne has Hughes in the form of his life, And he's just one of the big four. So if it's not Hughes, it could be Money, it could be Pappy, it could be Grant. How ridiculous is it that the Storm have another big four? Like, that's the type of thing you should only have once in every 30 years, let alone Melbourne just replaced the last big four with a brand new big four, and they're all absolute stars in their own right. So ultimately, I actually do lean to the Cronulla 9.5, and I was looking around. I would have played plus 10.5 if it was available. And I did also consider either team 1 to 12, which is $2 on 365. And some people might be wondering, so hopefully I can explain it. They might say, well, if you would have played Sharks plus 10.5, then why wouldn't you take either 1 to 12, which is plus 12.5? But if a line is 10.5, I'm always going to take the underdog plus 10.5 instead of either 1 to 12, because as unlikely as it may seem, the underdog winning 13 plus is always going to be a greater chance than the game landing exactly on 11 or 12. So that was my lean. So therefore, probably no best bet, but I would say Storm 1 to 12, is going to be my pick. And the only way I think the Sharks win this one outright is Nico or Trindle having close to the game of their life.
Absolutely, mate. And we do have a YouTube comment from Suka Lamink, and he says you can get the Sharks plus 10.5 on better under pick your own line at $1.80 winning, which would qualify for a best bet.
You know what? I looked there and it was $1.78. So I guess that's the nature of these things, can be dynamic. And sometimes I'll play something and then people will say, oh, well, now it's dropped down. But obviously the second the bet leaves my lips, and wait till I tell you about the next game and how angry I am about a bet that I left behind for Cowboys Knights. But as soon as I share something, then it could move. Now I'm in a tricky situation. I didn't find it because it wasn't there when I looked pre-show. Let's call it a very strong lean, but without making it official. And now that I've done that, you can back it if you like, plus 10.5 at $1.80 if that's correct on better. And you're probably going to win knowing my luck because it won't be an official play.
Yeah, we have had some unlucky moments with that sort of stuff in the past, mate. Game 3 is Saturday, 7:50 p.m. We're at Queensland Country Bank Stadium up there in Townsville, where the Cowboys host the Knights. Now, this line was minus 7.5 against the Cowboys, and there has been no change. Jordan McLean returns for the Cowboys. For the Knights, not too much news, but Kai Pearce-Paul is named on their extended bench, and he is a chance to play. Alrighty, Winnie, let's start with this stat before I hand it over to you. Since the modern final system was created, the 8th place side has only won 2 from 12. That means the 5th place side, which is the Cowboys in this situation, has won 83% of the time. Are you going to stick with that trend and data?
Mate, the 8th place side very nearly won last year, and the shoe was on the other foot. It was the Knights hosting the Raiders. Didn't that one go to Golden Point in the end? You're right. The 8th place team, I think it wasn't that a penalty goal by the Knights in Golden Point after a crazy comeback by the Raiders? Since we're live, you can always fact check me on that one, guys. But all right, look, the 8th place side naturally is going to have the worst winning percentage in finals, although it should actually, it's more friendly since the McIntyre system. If people don't recall, of course, 8 used to have to travel to face the minor premiers in the finals. And I like the new system better because you get more evenly matched teams. But where I want to start, as Clarkey says, 88th minute penalty goal. That's right. In the game where Jack White bit somebody. And that was a wild one to end the finals. Where I actually need to start is, we talked about the lines in the recap show, read them all out. And you said to me, Clarkey, do any of those stick out to you? And one absolutely stuck out to me. And I said, yes, but I'm not going to share it. That was North Queensland minus 5.5, which was $1.90 everywhere. And I seen that Sunday night. We didn't know that matchup until, full time of Dolphins Knights. And then we're live within 10 minutes doing the recap, right? So I just had a quick look at what the lines were for the finals. And my instinct is only 5.5 for the Cowboys. But you tell me, guys, what should I do? Because if I said that on Sunday, I was certain it wouldn't still be there today, And also, if I had said I really like the Cowboys -5.5, I had not done my full due diligence. I hadn't looked at every aspect of the matchup. I might see that and think, oh, that looks really good. And then you find out when you read a bit more into it, oh, it's because Nanai still might not be right or whatever. There's a possible suspension for a key Cowboy. So it's hard for me to make something a best bet if I haven't completely checked every angle of it. But by leaving it alone, now we get to 48 hours later and the bet's gone. So it's a tough conundrum, and it's something I've talked about this year that I feel like all too often some players that look really good to me aren't on the board on Tuesday, and I've got to find a way to deliver more to the great people that follow this show. As for the matchup, as it stands now, I feel like welcome to the 2024 season, North Queensland Cowboys. We missed you this year, but you finally arrived just a couple of weeks ago, but it's not too late because I want to run you through some of the head-scratching results for the Cows this year. I mean, go back all the way to round 2. The Cowboys hosted the Knights, and really I didn't think deserved to win that one, but the Cowboys pinched it by 1 point over Newcastle. The next week, the Cowboys lost by 26 to Brisbane. The Cowboys lost to the Eels. The Cowboys lost by 40 to the Sharks. The Cowboys lost at home to the Dolphins in a week where the Dolphins had half the spine out, if not more. The Cowboys lost to the Titans. The Cowboys lost at home by 30 to the Warriors. The Cowboys lost at home to Manly. The Cowboys nearly lost at home to the Dogs. If the Dogs ground a try, I think Dogs win that, but the Cows, in fairness, pinched it. And the Cowboys lost by 24 at home to Brisbane. This putrid Brisbane side that could barely walk and chew gum by the end of the year. So that's not me nitpicking some bad results. That's more than nitpicking. That is very muddling form by a team that still somehow finished 5th. How did North Queensland still finish 5th? Well, among all the games they lost that you felt North Queensland should have been a lot better, there were some surprising wins. This Cowboys team took a scalp of Penrith in Penrith, Roosters at Allianz. And in addition to that, in the last 3 games, the Cowboys have averaged 40 a game. So look pretty good, humming nicely, coming into the finals. And they'll say that's when you want to play your best footy at the end of the year. And Cowboys are another team that's basically full complement, which includes 6 Origin players. As for Newcastle, we talked about this a bit in the recap because we came straight off that essentially elimination finals game on Sunday, and we both admitted that we wrote the Knights off a few weeks ago. And this is a season where Ponga missed a bunch of games again. The Knights ultimately had to win their final 3 games to get in, but give credit to Newcastle. They won them all on the back of excellent defence and moments of brilliance by the main man at the back, who, if people may have forgotten, Kalen Ponga begun his career as a Cowboy. But remember, the Cowboys had the choice to sign Ponga and keep him or sign Chad Townsend. So they all decided they definitely wanted Chad Townsend. They let Ponga walk. Oh, wait, sorry, was that the hammer? Sorry, no, Ponga was a little bit before that time. It was Lockie Coote, I think, that they had at fullback, and so had to let Ponga go. He's not the only superstar that can turn the game for the Knights either, because Bradman Best, bursting into the Origin arena last year, earning that return again this year, was part of the reason that scored the winning try, in the decider. That's going to be a lot, Bradman Best, for Vilea to handle. And then I think the forwards for the Knights, the unsung heroes, I would say Leo Thompson might be the most underrated prop in the comp. So it's not all the names that there's not like a lot of star power for the Knights, but I also am definitely keeping my eye on Pierce Paul. I always hesitate when I say that name because Paul Pierce played in the NBA for like 20 years, so it kind of trips you up. But it's Pierce Paul in the NRL, been an outstanding find from England and injured about 2 or 3 weeks ago. But if he could play in this one, the Knights will need him because the Cowboys have got some very exciting edge forwards on their side. So I will throw back to you in our open exchanges, mate. Newcastle just making up the numbers, as you said, by the 8th place stats? Or is this a team that can win a finals game away from home?
So by all stats and metrics I could find, yes, they are making up the numbers. That's what the stats tell us. There's this, I'll say it's not really a theory, but Andy Raymond told me this. He was speaking to DCE once and he asked him, what's the biggest thing you look for when you come into the finals? And DCE said he would print the team lists of the other teams that he's playing and he'd highlight how many of their players are in career best form. And he said even if he wasn't playing a team that week, he'd still do it. And DCE's logic was that the team that had the most informed players is typically who will win when we hit this time of the season. And I thought about this and I thought, well, you probably put Dane Gagai, Bradman Best, Kalen Ponga into that category. But then I think when you look across the fence to the Cowboys, you could make that argument for someone like Reece Robson, Scott Drinkwater, and Tom Dearden as well. So I think that cancels it out, even if I did want to say that as a point. As I said, 8th place has only won 2 from 12 in this final system. The Knights are the only side that entered the final series without a positive win-loss record. They went exactly 12-12. And they're also the only side there with a negative 4 and against. These sides have met this year. It was at this same stadium, and the Cowboys won 21 points to 20. Cowboys have won their last 3 games in a row over the Knights, and the Knights have not won in Townsville since 2015. More to that, the Cowboys have won 7 of their last finals games played in Townsville, obviously indicating how much of a home ground advantage it really is. So I'm going to go against every single stat there, Winnie, and I'm actually going to predict the Knights here at the line. I'm not sure if they can upset the Cowboys completely, but I just think that when you look at these sides' last 3 games, you also would probably have to say the Cowboys have been more impressive. But I don't know if that falls into their favor, because when I went back and had a look at their season, they've won 3 or more games in a row 3 times, but on 2 of those occasions, again, it included the West Tigers. And the theme of their season for me has been 3 really great games, maybe 3 really great games or 2 really great games. And then when they get to that 3rd or 4th game of consistent performances, they crap the bed and no-show. You guys remember when we both tipped the Warriors as an example, and there's a few other ones throughout this season. The most recent one that I can think of is the Broncos one. I thought the Cowboys would win that in a canter, and they put up a no-show. So I've got real concerns that could happen here, just going off that season trend. The Knights, they're playing tough enough. They're playing a tough enough style at the moment where I think they can make it tough on the Cowboys. I mean, the Dolphins scored 40, and they could only score 6 against the Knights. Even if we give the disallowed try for the controversial obstruction, that still only gets them to 12. And the Knights last round, they made that a real finals game with defensive focus. And if that same matchup is to play out here in Townsville, and it's a tough, gritty game, I actually have to favor the Knights based on what I've seen in recent games this year. So I believe this could be the upset of the finals. I'm not, if I have to pick an upset, I'm going to pick this game. I do think all favorites should win. And don't get me wrong, guys, with all the stats that I just read out, I completely understand why majority of people will be shaking their heads right now and disagreeing with me. But the Cowboys just haven't built enough trust with me in this season. So I'm going to go Knights with the head start, Winnie. But I do fully acknowledge it's bold for a reason, right?
If I had to pick an upset this weekend, I would go Bulldogs.
Well,
I'm
that is
kind
an
of
upset
cheating.
now because it's,
Yeah, they're slight underdogs. But that should be that is the underdog with the best chance of winning. So, but if you call that a 50-50 and then the others, the home team is the clear favorite, that's interesting to me. You're definitely saying the Knights would be your favorite upset of the first 3. Whereas for me, I actually would say the Roosters would be my most likely to upset the apple cart. Another question for you. Is that hat new? That Clarkey's? Or you had that for a while?
Someone was asking me about that on Instagram before. It's unreleased at the moment. So I'm going to release it soon with the company, and I'll probably give away a few on my page this weekend.
That's fire, man. Send one my way. On the note of people listening to this pod, they have no idea what we're talking about, but Clarkey's got an epic Clarkey's column hat. And speaking of people listening, you don't read all the comments that we pop up on the screen, but there are a heap of insightful comments that come through, which is awesome. I suppose that's the trade-off for staring at my mug for an hour. You get all these extra comments. Sorry, we don't highlight as many as we could, but I've seen quite a few with contrary opinions. Some people saying the Knights played their final last week, so therefore it's hard for the Knights to get up. But other people saying that's an advantage. The Knights are already in finals mode. Depends how you read that. There was another comment about Ponga being the best player on the field. I could start there. That's how the Knights win this game. It's not controversial to say that Ponga could lead the Knights to an upset, but it's a little bit like we talked about Turbo or teams that have one focal point of the attack, it is hard for that player week in, week out to just carry the team, because when all eyes are on KP, which will be the case for the Cowboys defenders, it's going to be a very tough game. It's going to have to be one of Ponga's best of his career, I reckon, to win this one. That's why I could only play the Cowboys. So it goes back to -5.5. Just didn't seem right to me. Would have definitely played it as a best bet. At -7.5, still lean to North Queensland, but begrudgingly, I'm going to leave it, though. They are the better team and they are at home with the longer turnaround and the easier game last week, which I think sets up North Queensland well. And for me, it's actually similar to the two previous finals. The difference is the halves I trust to make the match-winning play. But understanding both teams have got superstar fullbacks. And then we haven't mentioned Val Holmes. His goal kicking at the moment is an absolute cheat code. Did he miss? He didn't miss against the Dogs. So he's on some sort of crazy streak. I'm not sure how many he's kicked in a row, but there's also like a streak of how many he's kicked from the sideline in a row. It could be the difference here as well. And with a line like 6.5 or 7.5, if the Knights miss one conversion and the Cowboys don't, it could just be one try between these teams, but an 8-point margin. So that's my concern with kind of taking the points with Newcastle. And that's why maybe you do still, listen to what we've said here. And if you like North Queensland, then maybe still play the -7.5. I have to say, I'm not going to be surprised if North Queensland actually wins the game big either. And then I'll be totally whinging on Sunday night and lamenting not laying the 7.5.
Yeah, I do completely see it from your perspective there. I think when we sit down to do our recap, people are either going to say, Clarkey, you're a genius picking that upset, or they're going to say, you idiot, why did you ignore every single stat and piece of form heading into this game? So I'm prepared to either look like a champion or swallow my pride on camera when we come back here to recap.
Can I just clarify, though? Are you picking the upset or are you picking the Knights to cover?
My prediction will be Knights to cover. I'll play it conservative.
Okay.
But if I had to pick an upset...
You're not having it both ways then, because I'm sure there's people out there that will take a team to cover, and then if they win, act like they picked that team to win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're thinking something like a Cowboys 1-6, if we narrowed the margin there.
I could see that, but where you actually got me scared was, Val Holmes, 24 or 25 goals in a row. That could be the difference, to be honest. But no, I'll take Knights at the line. I'll leave it with a little bit of wiggle room. And either cop my medicine or celebrate on the recap show. Final game of the round, mates. 4 p.m. Sunday. We're at Accor Stadium. Bulldogs host the Seagulls. Now, this line was -1.5 against the Bulldogs, but it's now reversed the other way. What do you think the main reason for that was?
The Addo news.
Addo news, yep, of course. So let's start there. Addo he's stood himself down, we're told. So Jarrell Skelton and Jacob Kraz are the wingers. Bronson Sherry's back, Matt Burton's back, of course, and Turbo is back for the Seagulls. So Kohler goes into the centres and Tommy Talau moves on to the wing. This is an interesting one to break down, Winnie, because we saw this game 10 days ago and Manly won there by a margin of 14. Do you think they're going to repeat that effort in such a short span of time against the Dogs?
That's the interesting part about this, that we got that dress rehearsal. I will get into why I think the conditions are a little different this week. And I'll say it again that the Dogs was a team that was in my top 8. Not that I did very well in my season predictions, but I could see promising signs about this Canterbury side, and they've had an awesome season, albeit the Dogs are skidding into the finals on the back of a couple of comprehensive defeats. And I was also a little bit dismissive of Manly coming into the year, but they've had a stellar season. I suppose I just didn't envision DCE being dead set as good as he's ever been at that ripe old age of about 36. The Brooks combination has worked really well for the most part too. And while Manly was slow early, the Seagulls have picked things up, especially in the last couple of months. That includes rolling the Bulldogs. They're at Accor just 2 weeks ago, as you said. But like the Bulldogs, Manly comes into this knockout game off a humbling home defeat. So both sides need to dust themselves off. That Manly loss cost them the right to host this game, in fact. So there was a little silver lining for the Doggies. Not all their best players played against North Queensland. And They thought that they needed to win the game and they would have approached it that way. But the Dogs, it didn't cost the Dogs too much. I suppose it cost the Dogs the chance to host Newcastle as opposed to Manly, which maybe would have been a more appealing matchup. But most importantly for the Dogs, on the back of the season they've had and the way that they've got Belmore buzzing, would be to get this game at a core, and they're going to sell tens of thousands of tickets. And I do think that's going to be a major factor, the home crowd here. So that's one of the reasons why I like the Dogs' chances a little bit more this time around. Going back to the game 2 weeks ago, actually, Manly was my best bet in that game. And the way that Manly won the game, you said they won by 12, Manly. It wasn't even that close either. The Dogs scored a couple late. And Manly exploited what the Dogs have been using as a strength all year, which is this smaller but mobile pack. So Manly just said, well, the trade-off of having a smaller, agile, mobile pack is that you're not going to have the grunt and the force. And Manly just came in with the power game. And the question is whether the Dogs can see that blueprint and turn it around. Let's not forget as well that Dogs' best player this season by a decent margin is Stephen Crichton, who did not play in this matchup a couple of weeks ago. And it's not just what he can do in attack. It's not just what he can do in the way that he binds the defense, but it's his leadership as well. I mean, really, having a shutdown defensive center can just plug up almost a whole side of a field in defense. And the Dogs have got this strange stat that they're like top 2 in the comp for missed tackles, and yet they're also top 2 in the comp for defense. And I really think it's the ability to rush out of the line and diffuse a play, even if the tackle is not made. It stalls the opponent, and then they're able to scramble the Doggies and cover up and cover for that player. And Crichton is an excellent decision maker with the athleticism that, when he's shooting out of the line, it could also be to take a ball back the other direction. So I think it goes both ways. Like the Manly's going to want to wear down the Dogs' pack, but I do feel like the Doggies can use their style to their advantage with a full complement outside of, obviously, Addo-Carr. You maybe don't need to get into that situation. You can share it, like any information you've got on that. But tell me how you see it playing out before I'll tell you mine.
So I think Addo-Carr is, you'd definitely rather him there than Jarrell Skelton. But Jarrell Skelton brings other abilities to what Josh Addo-Carr does. So Fox is obviously the quicker player. But Jarrell Skelton moves really well. He breaks tackles. He has strong early hit-ups to their sets of 6. So I do think it's fair that it has shifted ever so slightly, but I'd probably have it as at a pick 'em once Addo-Carr got ruled out there. So for that reason, now that the Bulldogs are plus 1.5, I prefer them ever so slightly. And I do acknowledge they're on a 2-game losing streak headed into the finals. But I do think that with their last loss they had against Manly, that can almost be turned into a positive, in that you do learn more from a loss than you do a win. And it is hard to replicate 2 wins over a side in a season, let alone 2 wins that are so close together. My other factor is Turbo is even more injured coming into this game now. Now, they aren't as reliant on Turbo as previous seasons, but coming into that game, he required pain-killing injections on a left shoulder injury. Well, he's now got a grade 3 AC tear, which will be pain-killed injections as well. So there's a double risk of injury now for Turbo on either shoulder, both shoulders injured. And I think that is something we need to talk about. But I will stay with the Bulldogs. And I want to look at their last 2 games. Now, I don't think they've suddenly forgot how to defend. I just think it's more of a case of this is a side that was confirmed for finals. They haven't felt that feeling. A lot of their players have never played finals. Certainly, it's an unfamiliar feeling for the club. I believe last time was 2016. So it's almost as if they were saving themselves. Like the best Bulldogs side didn't rock up here against Manly 10 days ago. And the best Bulldogs side that we've seen didn't rock up in the final round there either. So maybe they were just saving themselves that little bit of extra percentages there. And when I did break this one down in round 26, I said the same thing as I'm about to say here. This is a classic case of offense meeting defense and who can impose their will. Now, 10 days ago, it was Manly, but I think, again, it's in the Bulldogs' favor here because it is easier to make defensive tweaks, particularly when you have a player like Stephen Crichton return, than it is for Manly to develop new attacking game plans to break down that defensive structure. So I do favour that to the Bulldogs there. My factor is the same as yours, though. There will be a monster crowd here. This will be the biggest crowd of the round by far. It will be a lot of Bulldogs fans. They will be loud. They will be passionate. And that could pressure the officials to make a call around ruck infringements or penalties in their favour there. One final word on Manly. I think they really dropped the ball last round. Super disappointing. They didn't handle the pressure of locking up a home final very well. And the environment was their own home ground. Now the pressure increases. This isn't to get a home final. This is to stay alive. This is do or die. And the environment becomes a lot more hostile being at a core stadium, the Bulldogs' home ground there. I know a week is a long time in rugby league and Manly could turn it around despite being a short time frame there. But I just feel the Bulldogs will be a bit too tough for them this time out. So for that reason, I do prefer Bulldogs at the line. Winnie, I'll give myself that 1 point insurance, mate. Break it all down for us and give your final say on this game, please.
It's the type of game that easily could be a field goal shootout at the end, could be bonus footy, golden point like it was a year ago in that finals match of week 1. So taking the 1.5 DCE field goal insurance, I'm actually going to tip the Dogs might win it by a field goal. So it could be a Birdo field goal and that magical season could continue. Loud's 86 actually mentions on the previous game that Ponga and Val are both kicking 86% this year. So that's a surprising stat. Thinking how good Val has looked, I'm certain that Ponga must have had a greater percentage of those closer to the posts, if that's correct, because I'm marveling at the way Val's kicking them. And I probably haven't noticed as much Ponga. Ponga hasn't kicked as many goals this year because he was out a few weeks. But look, fair point. Just, I don't know if you tell me Saturday night, like which team's going to be more successful goal kicking, I'd feel pretty confidently it may be Val. Pretty even matchup in this one. Kicking, in fact, all facets of the game. Like, you know how good the Cherry Evans kicking game is, but so is Matty Burton. Both sides are pretty close to full strength. It's a shame that this Addo-Carr situation hits at this time of the year. And then on top of that, you got Karaz has potentially a shoulder complaint, but he's a tough competitor. And, I'm taking Dogs plus 0.5 point first half. And I'm also taking the Roosters with a 1.5 try handicap and 1-12 to keep it close with Penrith. And so I'm not going to use the following as reasons for my bets, but Dylan Edwards goes into the Friday night game with a very sore knee, to say the least. And Turbo comes in and they're going to say he's right to go. But again, Turbo could be troubled by this shoulder. You don't know because it's do or die. So it's easy for Manly to say, oh, yeah, he's right in 2 weeks because it's finals. But realistically, like if this was round 27, would Turbo actually be back in Sweden, or would they ideally give him another week? I would just call it a little bit of upside. There's a bit of uncertainty around a player being at their best. You don't bet it hoping that's the case because maybe Turbo is right to go or so tough that he plays through. But it's a potential factor that could go our way. I think the Dogs look at how Manly beat them, and it's very hard to beat a side 2 weeks in a row, especially when you're not the better team. I think the Dogs are the better team. It goes back to not only the atmosphere, but the toughness of this Dogs side. They're awesome defensively. Let's put the last couple of weeks aside and say they did meet a really hot Manly, followed by a really hot Cowboys side that both put on big scores when the games got away for the Dogs. But again, no Burton last week. Couple others out, and the week before, no Crichton. Great spot for Manly. So what I'm getting back to is the identity of this dog side is elite defense. And I just see it every week when I watch the Doggies. They'll drop the ball in their own half and they'll all be smiling and high-fiving like there's nobody drops their head. There's absolute supreme confidence that we're going to turn this opponent away. And that's what wins finals games. And on top of that, the style, I think this one could be played close to the vest, like neither team wants to make any early mistakes and give the opponent sort of any early momentum. So it could be low scoring first half as well. That's why I've gone Dogs first half with the 0.5 point hook. But if I have to pick a winner, I'm actually going to also say the Dogs. So if I could have got 2.5 for the full game, I may have played that. And that's another one I think I saw was like $1.78. I'd even be happy with 1.5. Just my favorite play was the first half line, but you're not going to be surprised at all. Are you, if this one comes down to a field goal?
We aren't. I'll just make a quick note on that. Because we're in finals now, Winnie, it won't be golden point. It'll be golden time. So even if you kick the field goal, we will go 2 5-minute halves. And then if it's tied again at 90 minutes, we go infinite golden. Then it goes to golden point infinitely until someone kicks a field goal, essentially.
No, good call. Good call. I mean, it could still be a field goal shootout kind of from the 70-minute mark if the scores are level. But great point there. That's something to be considered for overs bettors or unders bettors, that you might say, oh, this game, has under written all over it. And I don't have the total in front of me. What is it, like 42.5? And you play under and it's 20 all. And you're thinking, I'm pretty sweet. 43.5, right? And you play under 43.5. You think I'm pretty sweet here at 20 all or something. Or it could even be like 18 all and you think I'm set, and then they score a try each in extra time. You get cooked. So it is one thing to consider. Unders on 365 is advantageous because they'll result you at 80. But overs on other bookies, it's that little extra possibility of getting some points. It has happened before. I know we'll recap our bets, but just wanted to reiterate the draw. The sides that are on the same side of the draw, let's assume that the Storm and Panthers win. That would send the Sharkies through to host the winner of Cowboys Knights. And then if we say the Roosters lose to Penrith, they'll host the winner of Dogs Seagulls. So my question to you is, of the bottom four sides, who's the most likely for you to make a prelim? Like, someone has asked us, can the Dogs go all the way? Let's begin with, do you see any of these sides make it a prelim?
No. So based off my tips this week, week 2 of the finals will be Sharks hosting the Knights and Bulldogs hosting the Roosters, right? In those two games.
Well, you haven't tipped Knights outright, or you have?
Well, you're right. Yeah, so it could be Cowboys there. But regardless, my prelims is the Panthers hosting the Sharks and the Storm hosting the Roosters. But
okay, so you're not picking it, but if you could, which of the bottom four has got the best chance to get to a prelim?
Oh, see, it was Manly before Turbo got extra into, just for their ability to score points and because they had beaten the big three before. I'll probably stick with them. I just can't see a world where the Knights win in Townsville, win in Sydney, and then go again because, they did play that finals type game in round 27. Look, the Bulldogs, if they win this week, mate, they would go against Panthers or Roosters. Let's say it's Roosters for argument's sake. They are 1-1 against the Roosters this year. So I'd probably have to say Bulldogs because I'm going to tip them this week, right? And then they're 1-1 with the Roosters already this year. So they'd need to win that. Then they would go across to Melbourne and face the Storm. But look, they were close there as well, actually, earlier this year, man. Storm only scored that late try. So I'll go Dogs.
Realistically, for any of these bottom four sides, making a prelim would be an outstanding season, just like you can say about even Melbourne overachieved last year to make a prelim, and the Warriors certainly. So to win a couple of finals games, let's not get any further ahead of ourselves. I could see the Roosters being pretty flat if they do go to war with Penrith and fall short. And then, as much as I'm giving Roosters a chance this week, they are also a candidate to go out in straight sets because the realization would set in, we're really not going to win the comp. We've got to go through another battle with the Dogs. And then what's our reward? We have to go to a rested Storm. That could be tough. So could someone like the Dogs or Manly, because this is pretty much a 50-50 to end the round, beat a beaten Roosters side? And Lord knows if there's any more casualties out of that Panthers game, any more suspensions or injuries, last thing Roosters need. And then on the other side of things, I do think the Cowboys will win. And could the Cowboys beat Cronulla? North Queensland was flogged by the Sharkies earlier this year in Sydney. It's a tough trip for them. But the Cowboys on their day, we've seen classic finals encounter between those two clubs. So I wouldn't write the Cowboys off for making a prelim as well. And while we both, and everybody, every man and his dog, I'm yet to see a comment of anyone picking an upset in the first two finals. And in fact, I haven't seen anybody really saying anyone's making the grand final outside of Penrith and Melbourne. That's certainly the sentiment amongst everyone going into the finals as it stands. It does not always play out that way. And I know at least one of these big guns is going to be very nervous at some stage in a game, whether it is week 1 or down the road. So that's why we play the games. It's not just played on paper. And I can't wait for it. Let us know what you think about, again, Clarkey's. Well, Clarkey, recap your Clarkey's Collect, and I'll recap my best bets.
Absolutely. So for Clarkey's Collect this week, I wanted to go 2 sides that have performed consistently this year. So I looked at teams 1 and 2. That is the Melbourne Storm and the Penrith Panthers. I'm taking them both head-to-head, and that was $1.87 on Sportsbet before we went live. However, it was $1.82 on several other sites, so it is above that best bet range just of $1.80, Winnie. And your best bets are?
So my 3 best bets, I'm going either team 1 to 12 in Panthers Roosters, which is 185 on 365. I'm also taking the Roosters plus 1.5 tries in the try handicap at $1.82 on Toppy. And then the Dogs plus half a point in the first half at $1.88 on Ladbrokes and Neds. On Thursday, we're going to do a finals extravaganza. I'm going to cook up a unique finals market. We've had great success with some of these unique combos I've come up with. Last year, I remember our finals combo, I linked it in with the Rugby World Cup and the AFL, and every leg won except the AFL. We needed the Melbourne Demons to win a game, and they were top 4, so they got 2 chances, and they lost in like consecutive weeks by like 4 and 2 points. That's how close we came. But I'll cook something up, whether I involve other sports or just the next month of footy. I've got a special guest from the group. Well, I think I'll have a few people contributing their favorite tip of the round. We'll get some more insights from Tristan as to how all the futures books stand. And I want to talk a little bit more nitty-gritty about the logic, because some of the conversations you and I have had privately and text message about whether you roll money over as opposed to betting a future, some of the strategy behind that. So no footy Thursday night for us. We will fill that void for you, and we can be an even more interactive show as well. So hope that people can join us then, which is only a couple of days away. But in any case, hope everyone enjoyed the show tonight. Have a fantastic week ahead of finals 2024. And best of luck with your punts. And of course, we'll recap it all Sunday night as well. Lego.